It's funny. I actually saw her predecessors were name dropping. Bonnie Cordon was actually in the
Uh-huh.
Washington, D.C. temple a few weeks ago. She just walked right
Ooh.
by me in one of the hallways with her bow. I forgot she's the president of Southern Virginia University
Yeah.
now. So
Yeah.
she was probably just up there like templing,
Doing a temple session.
yeah, but I was like, starstruck. Couldn't believe it.
Starstruck in the Washington, D.C. temple.
Couldn't believe it. That's the name of this episode, even though you don't give episodes clever names anymore, Kurt. That's the name of the episode, okay? So,
Mornings are better with a warm beverage, even for Latter-day Saints. Meet Postum, the ideal coffee alternative and proud sponsor of This Week in Mormons podcast. Spotted on the coffee aisle at Smith's Grocery or at your local nearby store. Can't locate it? No worries. Order it at postum.com. Explore delicious recipes to tailor your Postum experience. Start your day off right with Postum.
Welcome, TWIM Nation, to This Week in Mormons, the Taffy edition, which stands for Tiffany and Friends for You. I am your host, Tiffany Hales, and I have an extremely special guest here with me tonight. If you are a longtime listener of this show, you are going to not only recognize the voice, but you will recognize the name. My co-host tonight is none other than the founder of This Week in Mormons, Geoff Openshaw. Yay!
Tiffany, what a time to be alive. Yes, everyone, you can thank me for the misery that enters your ears on a weekly basis. It's delightful to be back. I haven't done a spell for a while since I bowed out from TWIM. It was about 2 years ago, really
Yeah.
right now that
Yeah.
that I put it in the very capable hands of Kurt. And I've come back a couple of times since then, but it's been that was probably within the first year. So it's been a little while since I've been here. So Tiffany,
It has been.
thanks for inviting me back. It's good to be back. Feels like coming home, good to
It
be here.
really does. We got online tonight to chat a little bit before the show, and I'm just like, oh, it's just like old times. So, all right. Well, since the listeners haven't heard from you in 2 years, do you want to give us any little bit of life update about what's been going on?
As you can see, I'm wearing a Detroit Tigers cap celebrating their excellency in the playoffs thus far. That's pure coincidence. I bought this cap when I went to Detroit for work last year for a week, and I went to a game, and I bought the most off-color hat I could find because it's like, what is this, cadet blue and neon green. Definitely not their uniform colors, but I said that must be mine, and now here they are in the playoffs. So I've been wearing it all week. That's my main life update. I bought a cap, and I mean, honestly, Tiffany, my life just continued. Let's see, where was I when we last checked in? I mean, I'm still in the bishopric, but it's a new bishopric.
Oh.
The last one got released last July.
Okay, but you didn't get released.
No. So I was the second counselor, and then now I'm the first counselor to the new bishop.
Oh, you got promoted.
If you want to call it that, sure. Really, the worst part about it is then like stuff falls on me more naturally if the bishop's out. Like then I'm the one responsible. It's terrible. When I was second counselor, it was great. If the bishop was gone, I could just let the problem is the former first counselor is now the bishop. So so it was kind of a nice slide like that. And it's been great. And I actually really enjoy serving in the bishopric. It is challenging, not just because of the time demands. I really find, it is two callings because you're in the bishopric doing bishopric stuff. And then they say you are the young men's presidency as well.
Yeah.
Which I have plenty of thoughts about that we could spend an entire show on, or maybe I should go on leading saints. I don't know, because I still struggle with, like, I get why it makes sense. We can spend more time with the youth. I think getting rid of the young men's presidency and and also the high priest group, for example, reduce the number of Melchizedek priesthood holders you need to organize a ward, for example, when you're trying. So I get there's lots of practical reasons, and it's good for the kids. But I do feel like it's very challenging. The more like bishopy counselor stuff.
Yeah.
I think that's more like naturally, I don't want to call it easy, but like I enjoy the admin stuff. I love doing like temple recommend interviews and talking to people and doing other interviews and stuff like that. But the youth stuff is fun, but yeah, it's just hard. You feel bad because I don't know if other people in bishoprics feel this way, but when I compare like the level of effort I feel like I am putting in dedicated to the young men and compare that to the young women's presidency, where that is their only calling. I'm not saying they're not capable of doing more. They for sure are. And I see the level at which they are performing. and the level at which we are performing as a bishopric, and we're just getting outclassed all the time. I'm sure it was that way even before the changes, because it's just young women are probably just better at
Yeah.
this stuff. But I honestly feel a lot of guilt, like I'm not doing enough and don't have enough bandwidth for the young men. So there you go. That's a whole
You need to
can of
get
worms.
yourself some really good young men's advisors.
See, that is the thing, but it could be a challenge. Like our ward has shrunk substantially. I know
Oh,
you're out there in Intermountain Westland
yes,
where
very true.
you're all out of touch with what's going on with the rest of us out
It's
there
very true. I'm
in the
not gonna
corridors.
lie.
Yeah. So that was an interesting kind of an artifact of COVID. Not completely. I mean, during COVID, some people started moving away just because they had some people moved, some people could telework. And we haven't had a lot of people move back in, probably because you can telework now. Like, I mean, I live outside of
Yeah,
DC. We used to get lots of people with either federal or military jobs and things like that. And they'd come and move into our ward. And I have to imagine lots of those are remote optional now.
yeah,
And so why move? Right.
yep.
Um, and it's not just our ward, it's kind of our general area. You've seen the wards have gone down a lot. We used to
Oh, yeah.
probably average pre COVID 240 people in sacrament meeting, and now we're at like 115 on a good Sunday.
Wow,
And so
wow,
you mentioned getting
that's
advisors.
yeah, you're not gonna
It's
get advisors if you only get 115 on
it's
Sunday.
been it's been a major challenge, and it's like
Yeah,
we're acutely aware of it, and it's hard because we just feel like we like don't have the
yeah,
personnel completely to do it, and we're trying to. It's the kind of our challenge, figure out
yeah,
what to do on that front. So I'm not trying to whine about bishopric stuff or anything, air dirty laundry or anything like that, but it's an interesting challenge right now. Try to figure out how to staff your ward in an effective way to still meet the needs of the members of the ward who are
exactly.
accustomed to a certain level of performance of the ward, while the ward is like the same size as wards I had on my mission in Europe, which
Yeah,
wards were always and they've changed you probably talked about this in the past year, how they adjusted the threshold, to organize wards and stakes. It used to be a different standard for North
yeah,
America. You had to have more members to do it in the US and Canada compared to elsewhere in the world. And now they brought that down to make it a global standard. So it's the same everywhere, which on paper is
yeah,
great. But it means you can organize wards now with like 100 odd people, which you couldn't do
yeah,
before in the States.
yeah.
But then you're still trying to like get all the callings filled and you
Exactly.
can't.
No, that's it's hard.
Yeah. Anyway.
And I should say, if you are outside the Mormon Belt, which of course is Idaho, Utah, Arizona,
Yeah. Hell on earth. Yes. Yes.
we got lots of hell on earth. We got lots of momans here that we can do stuff with. So
I mean, you've got lots of the people, you got temples everywhere, you've got your dirty soda. It's just everything. You've got an hyperinflated housing markets. It's everything you need to be happy.
exactly,
I mean, Tiffany, you've
exactly.
been out there living the dream outside of Boise for years. You guys have probably loved the past couple of years in terms of like portfolios and stuff. It's
Uh,
been dynamite, but
Well, let me tell you, the house I'm living in today, there is no way I could afford it if I were buying it today. I
no,
mean,
I
our
believe it.
housing market has just gotten like completely out of control, and it makes me sick for my kids. That's where it hurts my heart is with my kids
Yeah.
because I'm like, are they ever going to be able to afford a house in this valley? Because the wages have not kept up commensurate with the housing prices. So,
And isn't that kind of I've thought about this from a church perspective for some time because what you just said is something
yeah,
people said in my native Southern California
yeah,
20 years ago, right? And a lot of my generation left because
yeah,
exactly that. The parents who bought their homes in the 70s and
yeah,
80s, and even though interest rates were high then, the home, you could talk about the gaps between wages and
yeah.
affordability were much narrower than they are now. And and those parents think the same thing, and their kids all fled to
Mhm.
Arizona and Utah and all this and that, and eventually, a lot of those parents sold out in California and then bought houses in Utah because all their kids were out there.
Yeah,
And now, like you said, you're out there
yeah.
in Western Idaho and now facing that same dilemma. Can my kids afford Boise, which is not something I think most of us
Exactly.
thought we'd be saying
It's
20 odd years
definitely
ago.
not. Yeah, exactly. Not even 10 years ago. So,
I just
yeah,
wonder whether like affordability is going to become more of I don't know if I'd call it a social issue in the same way for the church, but you think I guess I've always wondered if it ever comes home really to roost in Utah, for example, where the house, where affordability has been a major issue in the past 4 years. Like, does it get to a point where even the Saints can't afford to be in Utah anymore and they have to go
yeah,
somewhere else? And will that be like an
yeah.
inflection point as far as
Well,
our giant church culture? We're not there yet, but I wonder
and I
about that.
think they're moving further and further, to the outliers of the Salt Lake Valley.
Sure. Yeah.
Over Labor Day weekend, we had some friends over, and their daughter was visiting from Utah, and they live in Utah Valley, out kind of really west of Utah Lake, and in her ward, because it's growing so fast. It's new developments, it's young families. They have 4 nurseries. They have like
Wow.
600 people at church every Sunday. And I mean, they could almost divide their ward every 3 months at the rate it's growing, because that's where families with young kids, if they want to live in Utah, can afford to buy a house. And yeah,
So
I
do you
mean,
mean like way over past Utah Lake, like Eagle Mountain kind of area,
yes,
like way out
yeah,
there, or
yeah,
like
way out
Goshen or
there.
something like
Yeah,
that? Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, not
yeah.
not Saratoga Springs. I mean, it's too bougie. Can't do that.
So yeah, so I mean, they just have to move further and further out, and so I don't know
Yeah.
if that will happen here in Boise, or what will happen,
That's
but
what so that's what happened, like I said, in my native California. The
yeah,
church has sold off a lot of its meeting houses in Los Angeles because the closer you are to the, like, urban core of LA, there just
yeah,
aren't even members there anymore, and they fled to the suburbs back when,
and
and
now
now
they're
those immediate
fleeing the
suburbs are too
suburbs.
expensive.
Yeah,
Yep, and now they're farther and farther and farther and farther and farther away. We're dealing with even that here where we are outside of DC, where a lot of people are going down farther south to, you don't know the area, but like Fredericksburg, Stafford,
yeah,
just deeper and deeper away.
exactly.
It's a crazy time, but
All
it
right,
affects the wards, people.
it does. And before we get into stories tonight, I have to thank our sponsor, Jeff. This year we have a sponsor, and
Is it
Postum
post
is
them
our
again?
it is
Sorry.
Postum
I
is
sh-
our sponsor for the year.
Good.
Don't
Oh,
knock
for the
it till
year.
you've
It's a
tried
yearly
it. It's
sponsorship.
a
This is so.
yearly sponsorship, Jeff.
I,
And do not knock it till you try it. And you should
I,
be. I don't know if you should be sad or glad that you are several thousand miles away from me, because anybody who comes to my house to record gets a lovely Postum beverage. They get to drink Postum with me.
are you getting comped postum for your participation in this? Do you get hooked up?
Uh, I got some chocolate Postum, and in fact, Ariane sent me a link, or Ariane sent me a text message today, and she said, "I have a new Postum recipe. When are we going to record again?" And I said, "We will next record October 18th." So she is anxiously awaiting October 18th to make her next Postum recipe that we're going to try on the show.
Wow, this has gotten real, man.
It's so real, Jeff.
Well, I'm excited. I'm all the love to the postum people. I guess
Exactly.
I love to talk with Kurt about how we zeroed in on this being. I like that this is like the year sponsor. That's not. I don't know why you're not leading off and just saying like, "Welcome to This Week in Mormons," brought to you by Postum.
Well, actually, if you look, when the episode gets put up on the Facebook, there's like a little teeny tiny postum thing right there on the Facebook over the episode. It's kind of
Oh, I've
cute.
seen some stuff. There's like that. Didn't they like
Yeah,
interview the founder of it or
yeah, they
something on
did.
some
They
episode?
interviewed that. Well, she's not the founder. She purchased the company.
Oh
She's
my
trying
goodness.
to revitalize it. So
That's some dope native advertising right there, people. Gotta
anyway,
love to see
so
it.
we are thanking our sponsor, Postum, and now we can get into some news stories.
Wait, why doesn't McKay Coppin sponsor this show?
I
What
would
the
love if
frick?
McKay Coppin sponsored the show, and maybe even if he'd be willing to come on and do an interview. Maybe he'll do an interview now that you're not here anymore.
Where are you, McKay? I liked your book. The Mitt Romney book was
Probably
very fun. Fun read.
knee
Enjoyed
deep
that
in
one quite a
political
bit.
stuff.
Sorry, folks. I know you in Utah. They don't like that Romney fella anymore. How dare he? Anywho, yes. Let us get into the body of what we're here to do today.
Okay, well, we are
Oh man.
leading up to General Conference weekend. It is Thursday when we are recording this, and of course, General
Mm.
Conference starts in a scant about 36 hours from now, give or take.
At least for
And
us, the
at
leadership
least,
meetings are going on already.
oh, okay.
Yes. Yes.
So let's talk about some General Conference stuff.
Yeah.
First of
Yeah.
all,
Okay.
we have a big milestone this year for General Conference. Huge milestone. It is the 100th anniversary of General Conference being broadcast on the radio, 75 years on television, and 25 years online. So
They're
that's kind of
counting
some
the
impressive
radio in
numbers.
2024. They're like, let's make sure to mention the medium no one uses anymore, folks. The radio, just
Okay,
to make sure they know we're still doing it.
I'm going to take exception with the
Also,
radio.
television.
And I'm going to take exception with television too. First of all, growing up, that is how I listened to General Conference, was on the radio. It was not on TV, despite the
Oh
fact that
yeah,
I
yeah,
live
I'm
in the
sure.
Mormon
Yeah.
Belt. And I refuse to pay for a satellite subscription in my car. So I legit have the radio stations in my car. So if I were to be driving around on conference, I would probably try and attempt to find a radio station on my car.
And I guess because of where you are, you do the radio, but, like, in my mind, why wouldn't you just fire up, like, the the gospel stream app or even the LDS dot like, the regular
I
church
can do
apps will stream it too. Just
I
on
could I could do that, but I'm just saying, I'm just that old school, Jeff, that I like a good radio station.
boy, I'm loving this in this article, this picture of Heber J. Grant was not a short man, was he? You don't
No,
really think about the height of some of the old prophets. He looks like he's
no,
a
no.
rather robust fella, but he
But
was
but
look at that,
still,
the first radio broadcast. That's a cool picture.
to think about 25 years on the internet, I mean, that's a long time too. So, anyway,
That's one I am very glad that it has evolved.
yeah,
It's great that it's been online because for a long time you could literally only stream it from the church's website from whatever weird widget they were using to do live streams on LDS.org back then. I like that has of course expanded now. I used to go to YouTube. I love that the church actually created the Gospel Stream app. If none of you are tracking it, and I think they primarily did that because you could watch conference or church content on YouTube, but then you're dealing with ads and other suggestive videos and stuff that could take you out of that
distract
headspace.
you, could distract you.
It could distract, but it's fair. Like I
Yeah,
wanted to the other day we were going to watch the Friend to Friend with my kids, and at first I didn't even think about opening gospel stream, so I was looking for it on YouTube, and of course they're seeing my viewing history and all this stuff on the TV, like all these other
yeah,
thumbnails for YouTube stuff that you don't need to clutter.
yeah.
It's not necessarily bad or anything like that. There could be bad stuff. You could really be showing your kids who you truly are, perhaps based on your YouTube behavior.
You
Um,
could.
but I'm thankful for that. I love that we've got a lot of those great apps now and places where we can do those things. Cool milestones. 100 years on the
I
radio.
know. I
100
know.
years. I actually we did a lesson on the fifth Sunday this past week with the youth, and it was kind of like get them ready for conference. Like, what can you do to get more out of it? And I hit them up with some little factoids, and it was the one that I thought was very interesting was it was 1850 when it was the first conference where they had all of the talks transcribed and published. Which that's way
I
earlier than I
saw
thought that
that.
would have happened. So
That
it was
was
the
in the
first time they
article
had somebody
too.
who knew shorthand and wrote down every single talk and the church published them. I thought that would not have happened until like the 1920s or
Yeah.
something like that. But that's been going on for a very long time, much longer than I expected to actually have the written remarks down the line. So I thought that was kind of fun. Yeah.
I I noticed that that was also mentioned in the article on the broadcasting anniversaries. They talked about that.
Okay, you've got it in there.
So then the
Um,
other conference thing that's happening is uh, it's been 5 years since the conference center has actually been filled to capacity because they have had seating restrictions, starting with COVID, and then they just slowly like allowed more and more people in. This year, it's every seat can be filled, so tickets for everyone this year. So they will have the conference center at capacity for the first time in 5 years.
well, I mean, now that the Biden virus is behind us, it makes it easier to do that, obviously. So now
Exactly.
they're done trying to control us with that. I think this is great. The article was interesting because the first thing that struck me when I even just saw the headline was conference center, it'll be at capacity. But I went back to how, yes, there was COVID, but then they've kept it limited for years because of all the construction going on in
Exactly.
Temple Square. And they've just said like there's nowhere to
There's
absorb
no
everybody
parking.
in
Yeah.
between sessions. Like there's nowhere to put them. And that's still mostly the case. But I guess this time around, there's a few more places are open. I mean, I know that they just reopened like the plaza in front of the church
Yeah.
office building and all that kind of stuff, which I guess is enough. But it does kind of crack me up because they have a graphic on Church News that shows the construction access limited areas. It's still a very big area, but I guess now you can. Okay, actually, looking at this though, you can access the old reflection uh,
Mhm.
fountain. So I guess that's open. Former old
Yep.
Main Street that the church bought all those years ago,
Yep. I
and
have
all the
been
stuff
there,
in the
seen it, done it.
plaza. And that new garden that's where the old North Visitor Center
Mhm.
was is now open. So I guess that's enough because you can get into the tabernacle apparently for some overflow for viewing. But everything tabernacle between tabernacle and assembly
Yeah,
hall, and then
closed off.
everything around the temple. The Joseph Smith Memorial Building is still shut down. The old Beehive House, all that stuff shut down. But they can fill it up again, I guess. Good for them.
Yes, they can.
It was a funny thing. I mentioned that lesson. So I quizzed the youth on like if they knew who basically the main church leadership was. I passed out a handout that had all their headshots, including like the General Relief Society and Young Women's Leadership. All these people asked them to fill it in, and then while my co-teacher ran something, I plugged it all into a spreadsheet and ran it all. And then at the end, we kind of revealed how much they knew.
Uh-huh.
And they, I was surprised how much of like the more senior apostles they knew because they're kids. Like I wouldn't
Yeah,
think that they have enough years under
yeah.
their belt or spending more time with elders like Holland, Uchtdorf,
Mhm.
Bednar, Christofferson, and Cook would be more ingrained in their heads because they're so young. Like I would figure the whole roster is pretty much at the same level of knowledge, of like knowing them in that
Yeah.
sense. But they knew them a lot better. And then there was a decided drop off kind of after that with being familiar with a lot of them until you got to elders Gong and Suarez, who were right next to each other, and that
Mhm.
shot up. They all knew Gong and Suarez. I don't know why. I joked about that to one of the parents afterwards, and he laughed. He was like, "It's because they're the only ones that aren't white guys," but which
There
might
might be
be,
some truth to that.
yeah. But I don't know if it's the content of their talks, but that was very interesting to me that they just, obviously it's not
Yeah.
scientific, but in that small sample, for some reason they know Gong and Suarez a lot more. Who
That is
knows? Who knows?
fascinating because I would have gone with your first metric that, they would know the older, more established ones, and it would be a lot of the newer ones that they'd be like, I don't know, some random
Yeah,
dude.
and they did in general, but those two jumped out. Like, yeah, they kind
How'd
of
they do
dropped
with
off in
the
between all the
women?
rest.
Did they know the women?
No, they didn't. Only one person knew Tracy Browning, who's the second counselor in the general
Okay.
primary presidency. That was it. And then a good handful knew who Brad Wilcox was because he's had a life outside of the younger
Yeah.
men's presidency, of course.
Yeah.
But after that, nobody knew any of those other people at
So
all.
no Emily Bell Freeman fans in your
No
ward?
one knew Emily Bell Freeman. Not a one. Zero. I
That
kept
shocks
I hooked
me.
it all up into a slideshow, and I was like 0% slide, 0% slide. I just kept going
No,
through them, and
that totally shocks me because she has I mean, first of all, she's got a very unique personality, but she also has a very unique look. She does not look like
yeah,
the rest of them, which I appreciate.
yeah, she's got a vibe. It's funny. I actually saw her predecessors were name dropping. Bonnie Cordon was actually in the
Uh-huh.
Washington D.C. temple a few weeks ago. She just walked right
Ooh,
by me in one of the hallways with her bow. I forgot she's the president of Southern Virginia University
yeah,
now, so
yeah.
she was probably just up there like templing,
Doing a temple session.
yeah, But I was like starstruck. Couldn't believe it.
Starstruck in the Washington, D.C. temple.
Couldn't believe it. That's the name of this episode, even though you don't give episodes clever names anymore, Kurt. That's the name of the episode, okay? So, another fun little conference bit. This is just minor, but the church has partnered with UTA, which is the Utah Transit Authority. They run all the front runner light rail tracks, all that kind of stuff in Utah.
Buses.
Yes, buses. And the church is excited to announce that members and friends, anyone who wants to come to Temple Square during conference, if you have a ticket to general conference, which those are free, but if you have a ticket
Yeah.
to general conference, you can use that across UTA's system during conference weekend and present it as proof of ticket, and you will ride for free, which is
Mm,
pretty cool. I mean, it's not for
very cool.
everybody, but it's for bus tracks, the S Line streetcar, which I believe is the one that's in Sugar House, and the front runner. Just present your ticket as proof of fare. I don't know if the church just kind of got UTA to just go along with it, if the church is actually subsidizing it or anything like that. But I think that's a good move because Temple Square, for one, like you mentioned,
Yeah.
not all the parking. I mean, you can park under the conference center, but a lot of the other parking is still it's
And
limited anyway in a
And I
downtown
don't know in their
urban environment.
downtown fancy mall, like on Sunday. I know the mall's not open on Sunday, but is the parking open for general conference? And even if it is, would you want to park in the garage and then have to try and get in and out of the garage
Well, it's like
after
parking at the conference center.
sessions?
I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
know if City Creek is open. I know if you say the mall itself is closed, but I've got to
the mall
imagine
itself is
since
closed on Sundays.
yeah,
So
but the church
anyway,
owns it. I mean, the church owns it.
yeah.
So why would they
Anyway,
not open that up? I don't
I
know.
don't know, but I have no idea. So
I don't know. But I like that they're doing this because any moves we can make to get people not to be car dependent, to avoid traffic and a crush in an urban environment like that, and encourage people to use transit, that's just a solid move and a great thing. So I love that. Like if I
completely
was
agree.
living in Salt Lake Valley or something like that, and I lived somewhere along the Green Line, like in Daybreak or something like
You
that,
take that tracks right downtown.
take tracks downtown. Don't worry about it after that. That's a great idea. I love it. Why not?
All
Good for
right.
them. Good for
Well,
them.
speaking of conference, should we throw in just a couple conference predictions while we are chatting before we move on to a new
Yes.
topic?
Pornography will be canonized. They're going to actually say it's okay.
No, no, I don't think that'll be
Oh,
happening.
all right.
No, seriously. What are you thinking conference wise?
Again, everyone, when we talk about predictions, they're just that. It's the classic thing they tell us not to do, which is
I know.
speculate on the things that the Lord's anointed are going to discuss. But hey, here we are. So I've seen a couple things. One, this was on Reddit. It was on Reddit, but it was with somebody who said I was at a mission president like training. So or mission presidency. So maybe it's like the missions have presidencies. It's usually
Yeah.
the mission presidents from somewhere else. Two counselors are like actual locals from the area. So assuming that person is telling the truth, they said that President Oaks was told them that we would be hearing more about the appropriate correct name of the church. Now I don't know if that means conference or if it's just going to be other forthcoming stuff, but why would it not be during conference? I don't know. So apparently
We're still not getting it right.
we're doubling down on that, I guess. How long has it been for that? We're on 6 years, I think, since we
Yeah.
kind of made those
Well,
announcements. So
yeah, because
yeah,
that
because it
was
was
one of
in
the first
2018.
ones that President Nelson did was say, "We're going to be Mo Man, no more."
Yeah, I have. When I was still doing the show, I spoke about this a ton. I think it's interesting because I of course, very much agree in making sure the name of the church is correct. Like, I don't know why you
Yes.
would dispute
Yeah.
that. Like, yeah, it's not the Mormon church. It's not the LDS church. It's not the Church of Latter-day Saints. That's the one news always says. They just drop out the Jesus Christ
Yeah.
part and just say Latter-day Saints.
Yeah.
Like, that's all fine. But I think when you're talking about the people,
Exactly.
that can be a little bit
Yeah.
different. There's room. I don't mind that we want to try to say that, push Latter-day Saints. It's good. But even after 6 years, like if I'm talking to coworkers or what have you, if I
Yeah.
say like I'm a Latter-day Saint or whatever, they're like, "Well," and say I'm Mormon, like, "Oh, okay, cool." And then they
Yeah.
immediately ask me questions about Mormon stuff that they know about, true or not. So we'll see. Maybe we're gonna hear more
Okay.
about that. And I, for some reason, feel like I wonder if we're gonna get another President Oaks like constitution slash political responsibility talk. Do you remember the one
Mm,
he gave in
I
October of
do.
2020 when
I do.
he qualified his remarks by saying, "Forgive me, international audience, but I'm speaking to America right now
Yeah,
because
I
this is what's
do. I
going down."
remember that.
And he gave a very lengthy discourse that was honestly not really spiritual in that sense, unless you get into like Constitution being divinely inspired, that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. But it was really about like civic engagement and awareness and responsibility. And it was a great talk. I kind of wonder if that's going to happen again. I think the church has gone to many lengths, especially in recent years, to try to drive home as much as it can that we shouldn't do like straight ticket voting, that no one
Exactly.
party should have dominance in our zeitgeist or in the political sphere or anything like that. I think the church has tried to do as much as it can without violating its nonprofit status, which forbids it from endorsing candidates,
Exactly.
to like tell the saints like we don't think you should be blindly voting Republican. Like we can't say those words, but you should not be voting blindly Republican. I just part of me wonders if President Oaks is going to kind of dip into that again, because I don't think Oaks is a big fan of 45. That's just my personal interpretation, and I just wonder if he's going to try to tacitly lean into that a little bit. He's not the man's not
It's
afraid to get all legal on us, so I don't know.
no, no,
We'll see.
he's not. So that will be very interesting. So I have two
Yeah.
predictions. First of all, I'm still on my bandwagon that Western Idaho slash Eastern Oregon is going to get one of those little small temples. And I still call it the Payette River Temple because the Payette River is right
What is that?
there on the border of Eastern Oregon and Western Idaho. And so I'm still on my bandwagon that I think that they're going to get a small temple over there. My second prediction
So like where
is
sorry, where would this be, like up in like Moscow?
Washington County. No, no, no. It would be probably about 40 miles to the west of where I'm at right now. So
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
Oregon border is about 45 miles west of Boise. And Eastern Oregon, there's a ton of saints in Eastern Oregon, and their temple
Sure.
is Meridian. And so they have a little hike to the Meridian Temple. And a lot of them have been very faithful in staffing the Meridian Temple. And so I could see not a big temple over there, but maybe a Burley, Idaho sized temple over
Not a big
there.
temple. Then you quote Burley, which is like 40,000 square feet.
Is
Yeah,
Burley
not
that
one.
big? I thought Burley was a smaller
Maybe
temple.
it's 30. I don't know, but isn't Burley at least 2 stories?
I don't remember.
I don't
I
know.
know it's not as big as Twin Falls. but a smaller temple over
Here
in
we
that
go.
area
Here we
for
go.
the Saints of Eastern Oregon.
38,600 square feet.
And I
So
predict that they will put it in Idaho as opposed to Oregon because there's less regulation in Idaho than there is in Oregon.
it's probably true.
So
That's a good
that's
point.
that's 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 my that's my prediction. My other prediction is
Hmm.
the opportunity to have female Sunday school presidencies, that a bishop will
I
have a
wish.
choice to either call an all male Sunday school presidency or an all female Sunday school presidency. I don't think we get to integrate, but that
Yeah.
the handbook will be changed so that Sunday school presidencies are not gender specific. They can be one or the other.
They can't be intramural though, as you
They can't
said.
be
Yeah.
intramural. Exactly. So those are
That
my
would
two
be
conference
cool. And also
predictions.
you're speaking to your Intermountain West privilege when you discuss the presidency, where the rest of us just have a Sunday school president. That's and like,
Oh,
that's all they're doing.
okay, fair
Um,
enough.
no, I'd be all for that because I've long wondered about some callings that seem like why can't women do them? Like
Yeah.
Sunday school president. Sunday school president to me is the most obvious because
Yeah.
years ago, ward
Mm,
mission leader, I could see that too, but
yeah.
maybe that's kind of like an extension of the bishop in a way. So, okay, maybe it has to be a priesthood holder. I mean, the handbook says it has to be one. I get
Yeah.
that, but I'm trying to think about the like reasons
Yeah.
why it needs to be one.
Yeah.
And kind of the same goes for whether it's the your family history leader
Mhm.
or when you get down to it, honestly, like clerks. And I don't know if that's just because they don't want to mix it up with women and men
Yeah.
in bishopric meetings, but like, why can't you have a woman be the ward clerk or whatever else? I don't know,
Yeah. I
or
don't
the
know.
executive secretary for that matter. I mean, literally, the brethren have administrative staff, and they are mostly women in
It's
the church
very true.
administration building.
It is very true.
I mean, so what's that about? I'd be down with that. I would love to see that though. Do you
Yeah.
think it would come in conference though, or would that be kind of one of those administrative things that the church would just kind of update the handbook and then put out a press release? Because that seems like it could be in that area where they just kind of announce a change outside
Yeah.
and not make a big
I don't
huff
know. To
about it
me, this
in
just seems
conference.
so big that that would be something that maybe they'd announce in conference or at least announce it in a leadership meeting. They have all the leadership meetings preceding
Yeah.
conference, maybe a leadership meeting. I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's like people who think they're gonna announce more changes to the temple endowment,
Yeah.
like, in general conference. I'm like, "No, it's, like, not
Yeah.
the forum for that." Like, no, they just
They
quietly
they
update
change
it.
it, and here's so I don't know about you with the latest change they had when they shortened it.
Yeah.
Like, there was no announcement or anything. It was just people started going to the temple going, "This has changed." And then all of a sudden it was the buzz. Everybody
Yeah,
was
then it kinda leaked
talking.
out and, like, the church
And
started covering it and all that. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. So the church didn't have to announce anything because the gossip chain among members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was rolling it right out there for him.
Oh, yeah. I dug it, though. When I was there recently, that was my first time going since they'd shortened it. I mean, I'm there
Yeah.
to do temple work, but, of course, I was curious, like, well, how
Yeah.
how are they gonna facilitate, because it's down to, like, barely over an hour,
Yeah.
really, to
It's
get it done.
great.
So they shaved off some serious time.
Yeah.
And I thought it was interesting how they did it because it was literally just like nips and tucks all
Exactly.
across, and just that adds up. And it
Exactly.
made me wonder like what that process was like, that charge, because it means somebody probably sat there with the temple film, potentially in a temple,
Yeah.
like able to timestamp it, and like they're saying like
Yeah.
mark areas where you think we can make cuts, and let's
Mhm.
see how much we can get it down without
Yeah.
losing anything. I just think that would be a fascinating exercise to be given that assignment, to try to
Yes, it
find
would.
the ways you can just like shorten, shorten, shorten here, this. Um,
Exactly.
it was cool. It did feel like brisker. Like that was the first time I've been in a session, and I actually almost felt like we were kind of like flying. I'm like, boy, if I was, there were people there who were going through for the
Mhm.
first time, and I know it's hard to take it all in anyway,
Yeah.
but I wonder like this has got to be like warp speed for them because it's
Yeah.
like you're not going to remember anything,
That is
and you don't
exactly
recap a
how
lot of
I
things like you
felt
used to either. So yeah,
when I did a
so
session it was like boom, 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 boom. I mean, we were just ripping through it. I was like,
yeah.
"Oh, this is great. There is no time to fall asleep."
Yeah, boy, it's changed a lot, man. I think back,
Yep.
like, when I went through before my mission and stuff, and it's just like
Well,
COVID was an interesting
speaking
an interesting thing because it forced us to adapt, and that some of those
exactly.
adaptations have been permanent and made it zippier at the same time.
Exactly.
Yes.
So speaking of temples, we have several temple stories. We better hit on our temple stories here. Do you want to take
Yeah.
the first one? The opinion
Oh, sure, sure,
piece?
sure, yeah. Yeah, and I like that you're predicting that temple in Oregon, but I don't even know where to predict temples anymore. It used to be
I
fun. I
know.
used to do it here on TWIM,
Oh, I
and
know.
then It's just it's a fool's errand at this
It
point.
really is.
They're gonna go anywhere. So this is an article by Benjamin Park, who's an author and a scholar of a lot of Latter-day Saint issues. He works out, I think, he's out of Sam Houston University. We actually had him on the show years ago. If you go to the thisweekinmormons.com, look for his name. We interviewed him, I think, about his book back then, which was called Kingdom of Nauvoo, kind of a cool historical look at Nauvoo and all things Joseph Smith and all that. Anyway, he wrote an op-ed in the Salt Lake Tribune called The $1 Billion Temple Gamble, which I thought was
Okay.
interesting. There were some elements with it I didn't. Well, most of it was fine. It's just he recaps some of like obviously what we're doing right now. Temples construction has accelerated quite a bit. Also, that we invest heavily in the temples themselves. Like I mean, the Hinckley era ones,
Yeah.
notwithstanding, they've had to be rebuilt. We don't do it on the cheap. He cites the Pocatello, Idaho temple that cost roughly $70 million because its limestone flooring came from Bethlehem and the wooden doors were from the Congo River region of Africa. Like, we spare no expense on temples because it's
Uh-huh.
for the Lord, right? And I get it. Even though in some places we still build them a little more austere than in other
Yeah.
locales. They're still temples, but there's certainly not like equality in that same
Yeah.
sense. But then what he really wants to get into is that the temple is a crucial part of the covenant path, an expression we've used
Hmm.
much, much more over the past 6.5 years or so with President Nelson. You can actually look that up. And no one said it at all until he started
It's
dropping that. Now
very
it's a thing.
true.
And his main argument is that we are building temples not necessarily because there are like all the saints who need them. I know, like in Utah, for example, it is genuinely busy and like, sure, but elsewhere, it's more about in an era when religious participation is declining, the brethren don't want that to happen
Yeah.
to our flock. And by building temples and incentivizing people to go there and really encouraging them, like, you need to be in the temple, and then making them more accessible, it'll presumably keep those people more active in church because
Strengthen.
to get in the temple, you have to meet certain requirements, certain
Yes.
criteria. And if you are doing those things, presumably you are going to be a more active, involved member of the church. Um, and that totally makes sense. Like, I don't disagree with the thesis in general. He kind of gets to it quickly. There was one little thing. This is a little bit of pedantry that I took
Okay.
quibbled with. Um,
What did you quibble with?
well, he just mentions that that's because, let's see here. He says there's an institutional hope expressed in each of these announcements. He means temple announcements.
Yeah.
A reason for expending billions of dollars in construction costs. The temples in church leaders' minds should serve as an anchor for each community in a sea of disaffiliation. That is because they not only draw from financial reserves but also require local investment. Each temple requires substantial buy-in from the area's congregations, of course, to staff it and attend it. They are assigned as ordinance workers, participate in more temple outings, and arrange youth trips. And then he says they are informed when attendance is waning and sometimes tasked with participation
Ooh.
quotas. I disagree with that. That little part right there. I do know that leadership looks, of course, at temple stats. And there might be some meetings where they, like, they're not going to build a temple if like nobody's
Yeah.
going somewhere. I get that.
Yeah.
But um, I don't love that one line because I've been in enough other leadership meetings where they've actually drawn a point to say you might notice that your ward should be setting goals, whether it's your ward mission
Yeah.
goal, like whatever goals you have, and
Yeah.
and those could be numbers. That's not what it's about. It's about people, but you're still finding
Yeah.
a way to quantify that and track progress, and that's fine. But I've heard them say explicitly, we will never like say you need to go to the temple X number of times. Like, that is between you and
Hmm.
God. I've had a stake president who once
Yeah.
said, whatever your temple attendance is, like, try to double it this year. He's like, so literally, if you go once a year, try to go twice. If you go
Yeah.
zero times, whatever, but
Yeah.
if you go zero, go once. If you go twice, go 4 times. But that's up to you. And like, I know that they scan our barcodes and all that. So there's some element probably of the church being aware of how members are going. I have to imagine, why would they not? But at the
See, I
same
have
time, I have never seen
always,
us.
Jeff, I have always wondered this.
Yeah,
Because I know they scan your barcode, so they know every time you have at least entered a temple, whether you've
I would
been
assume.
there, for, to do baptisms or endowment or watch a wedding, whatever.
Yeah.
So, do stake presidents say get that information? Maybe not specific to the member, but you have X number of people in your stake who are regularly attending the temple or who have
I
attended
think
the
they do
temple
get
this
some of
month.
that because sometimes they'll drop that at
Okay.
stake leadership meetings. Like, we know that
Okay.
our stake is like provided is like doing blah 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 on temple attendance, or like the number of temple workers you're providing. That one's an obvious
Yeah.
stat. Of
Okay.
course, they get interviewed. Um, But yeah, I don't feel like I've ever been tasked specifically with a quota for participation. Nothing
Okay.
to like you don't go to meetings and they say, all right, everybody, they'll just say, go to the temple more, make that a part of your
Yeah.
worship to draw closer to Christ. They're not going to say our goal as a ward this year is that every member of the ward goes to the temple every single month. Like you don't usually see that because you're not supposed to.
No.
It's supposed to be between the individual and God to
Which I
figure out how to have.
appreciate.
Yeah, that's kind of what it's about. But anyway, main point of the article I happen to agree with. I mean, it makes sense. Of course, we're building temples in that same in this day and age
Yeah.
when people are burned out in many cases on religion. It keeps people excited. For one, we get pumped up every conference now, right? Even though it's not about the hubbub of the announcements; it's about the building and what it does. Uh, but it gets people engaged. I mean, they're building that
Yeah.
temple over right by my hometown in Yorba Linda, California, right now, and I cracked up because a year prior they dissolved the stake I grew up in because members have moved away, and then they up and announce a temple right there, which like blew my mind because I'm like, why? Like people are
Yeah.
leaving. Like there's not people are not moving in here. They can't afford to live here. But the Lord knows what He's doing,
Yeah.
and it's a great rallying point for people. And I go back to that history in the church when President McKay felt inspired to build a temple in New Zealand, and New Zealand did not have was not like this membership this big pool of membership like it
Yeah.
even is today. He felt like, no, if we build the temple, they will come. And that's, I think, what we're doing today, which is fine. It's great.
Love it. All right. Should we talk about some temples that have had some controversy and some legal challenges?
Some
Be-
drama.
because those
Yes.
are popping up all the time. I swear, every time I record, I'm talking about a new legal challenge related to a temple. It's kind of
Yeah.
crazy because it didn't
Yeah.
used to be like this. So why do you think that's changed? What's your thoughts on that? Why do we all of a sudden have all these legal challenges in temple construction and placement that we've never had before?
Well, it's because of the lack of freedom under the Biden Harris administration.
Oh,
And
okay.
um no, so I can't help myself, Tiffany. I'm sorry.
I
So
know. I don't. I'm
okay.
not
I
even
just
going to go
but
there.
the funny thing is there are corners of our society who generally are probably thinking there's some sort of organized effort
Conspiracy. Yeah.
with ne'er do wells who are trying to stymie temple construction for Mormons who have it in for us, or whatever. Like I'm just
Yeah.
that probably exists, but it has been interesting this sort of consistent opposition to a lot of these recent ones. Like for example, they just broke ground on the temple in Cody, Wyoming, and I'm sure you've been following this
Oh,
for
yeah.
like a year and a half
Oh,
or
yeah.
so, where the residents said the same thing. We don't mind the building itself; it's just too tall and doesn't fit in with the community in the neighborhood. It's too big.
Yeah.
And the church was like, we're going to sue you about that. And we're like, well, that's a fun way to make friends and neighbors. Uh, and that's a whole other thing I feel like I've seen like that's very different. Because like when they
They're
built the Newport
pushing
Beach
back.
Temple, yeah, when they built the Newport Beach Temple where I grew up in Orange County, the zoning commission or whatever, the planning board said it seems a little tall, like it's going to be bright, and that's why the building you see today is salmon colored and it looks more like California mission style. They made it shorter. They did that as a compromise,
Yeah.
and the church usually is into that. They've even made the Yorba Linda Temple they're building a bit shorter than it was going to be. So it's been curious in some of these cases where the church, like in Cody, was like, "No, we are doing what we want. Deal with it." And you're seeing that a bit in McKinney, Texas,
In
which I hope you've
exactly.
discussed on here.
We just
That one's
I
that one's a
discussed that
whole
2 weeks ago.
that one's a whole
Yeah.
mess.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and now you're kind of seeing this Vegas. They're going to build
Yep.
that temple out kind of more near like Summerlin, I think, neck of the woods. Big old thing. There's only one temple in Vegas right now. They're certainly overdue for a second temple. Uh, they don't like the height. There's people who are rallying against the height. And now in Bakersfield, California, which has nothing to celebrate because it's Bakersfield, and yet the people are trying to vouch for their city and say this is building is too
Yeah.
large, it is too tall, and they all say the same thing. We welcome the building, but it's too big and doesn't fit in with the neighborhood where you want to build it.
Exactly.
It's interesting.
Well, and the Las Vegas temple is at least the latest lawsuit. There was a lawsuit that was
Hmm.
filed saying claiming that the city council, so the city council approved this second temple in Las Vegas, but residents allege that they have violated the open meeting law, and they filed a lawsuit.
Mm.
They were
Mm-hmm.
in court a couple days ago, and I was going to look this up tonight before we got on the show to see if there was any result from court. I suspect that there probably wasn't, because usually what happens when you go to court is you make all of your arguments in front of the judge, and the judge says, I'll issue a written decision and get back to you. And then you're looking at, 6, 8, 10 weeks down the road before you get a
Yeah.
written decision from the judge. So
Yeah.
anyway, but yeah, that's just one of a number of the lawsuits that are out there and the opposition that the church is facing that it really hasn't had to, maybe it's had to face in the past, like you said when you talked about the Newport Beach temple, and they've made concessions, but it just seems to either be getting more press or it's becoming a lot louder. I'm not really sure which.
Yeah, and there's always 2 sides to that.
Yeah,
There's let's be good neighbors, let's find
yeah,
compromise. I remember on Newport Beach, they actually the church's reps actually said, "Yeah, but God wants it to be this way," which might be true, but I'm like, "You're in a civic it's like, you're at the Newport Beach city building arguing like they don't care. They're like it's not their
yeah.
job to right?"
To know,
Um but these situations have been very intriguing for that sense. We want to be good neighbors, but it seems like the church has been trying to put its foot down and assert itself a
yeah,
lot more. Which, in fairness, like that's a fair thing to do. If you're genuinely being discriminated against, perhaps because we are Latter Day
yeah.
Saints and whatever weird cultural baggage that might have.
Well,
Um,
and that's the argument they're
r-
making in Texas, in McKinney, Texas, is they are saying, hey, in your land zoning, in your zoning, you have zoning areas where you can have sexually oriented businesses, but you have no dedicated specific zoning for churches. So anybody who wants to do anything church related has to get a conditional use permit, and that
mhm.
is a violation of a constitutional right. And that's where they're going with that. And I thought that was fascinating in McKinney, Texas, that they had no acceptable zoning area for a church. If you wanted to build a church,
Yeah,
regardless of where you want to build it in McKinney, you were going to be filing for a conditional use permit in whatever zone you selected.
sounds like land use zoning in Houston. Texas is weird, man. The way they do zoning in a lot of cities there. I'm serious, but the one wrinkle I saw in that too is the church is arguing that, they should be they get their
Yeah,
permit, but like as a religious organization, you get certain exemptions because like the
yeah,
steeple is not part of the structure and doesn't account for
yeah.
the height requirements and all that. But I saw another wrinkle on this that because the temple is not technically a public building, unlike a regular meeting house.
Oh,
It's essentially a private club when you get to like legal speak because not anybody can come in
that
there,
would be very true.
and there are different regulations that might govern that. And so there are some who say like, no, but like
Mhm.
your whole thing about build it as tall as you want because it's a religious exemption doesn't count because it is not open to the public. It is a private building you're putting up, and that is subject to certain regulations. I just don't know where it ends in all of these. Like, well,
Yeah,
even if you get it through all the courts, like, well, we're going to build it anyway. Like, what's the open house going to be like?
yeah.
You know, have like happy communities out there excited to have this building they didn't want there in the first place. Like, I don't
Or are
know.
they going to be picketing your open house?
That's what I mean. They'll be like
Yeah,
exactly. I don't know. I mean, yeah. So it's both sides. You want to
yeah,
compromise, but at some point you stand up for yourself. If you're standing up for yourself in good faith, and we're not just trying to engage in bizarre legal machinations to get
exactly.
our way. So I don't know what Bakersfield's problem is, guys. You should be thankful to be getting a temple in Bakersfield. Seriously, what are you doing,
What
Bakersfield?
else are you going to do in Bakersfield?
What are you doing there? Your air quality sucks. It's very hot there. What are you doing? Be
Yeah,
happy about this. Celebrate this. If anything, say you're angry there's no Moroni on it. You should be
that's
enraged
what you should really be
about
upset
that.
about is the lack of Moronis.
Should I start? I wish I was local to any of these. I would go to these meetings and people are upset and take my turn and be like, I am miffed that there is no Moroni. How dare you take him off of your building, sir? I want the extra 12 feet of
Exactly.
golden horned statue.
Exactly.
Shameful.
All right. Should we move on to politics as long as we're discussing controversial
It's
topics
usually everyone's
tonight?
favorite reason to have me here in this subject. Yeah, it's going to be great.
Exactly. Well, you have our first story under the heading of politics tonight, which is quite colorful, I might say.
So, headline. Okay, here's one of these classic cases, I think, to preface it in fairness, where you might roll your eyes at the Salt Lake Tribune. And I like a lot of what the Trib does. This one's fair game, though. So, BYU Law School dean contributed to Project 2025, the bogeyman now, and then later had his name removed. Um,
From
okay.
Project 2025, not from the church or anything else.
No, no, no. So Project 20, and remember, this was, of course, that's just a headline. You have to read the article for
Yes.
context. He didn't do this while he was the dean of BYU's law school. BYU's law school actually has very stringent rules about being apolitical while you are part of the administration. But this fine individual, David Moore, was listed as a contributor on Project 2025, which is, of course, that sort of blueprint for government put forth by the Heritage Foundation. Um, that some people are trying to tell you will not actually happen if certain people are elected, which is nonsense. It will, because they did it last time with with what they had developed in 2016. So there's no reason to expect otherwise now. But it's become controversial, of course, especially since it got more exposure during the summer. And the curious thing here, though, is that so this fella, yeah, Moore was asked in 2022 to share his insights with the Heritage Foundation because of his experience working at the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, somewhere I actually used to work. I just missed this guy. He
Oh,
was there until 2019, and I was there in 2020. Um, Now, he didn't do any of this on behalf of Brigham Young University or anything like that. He was contributing to a section he contributed to. He wasn't like necessarily the main author. He was a contributor. Whoop-de-doo, right? I don't think that's
yeah,
that big of a deal. The tricky thing is here is that the Heritage Foundation published Project 2025 in April 2023, and Moore was put up there as a contributor along with his affiliation with BYU Law School. Um, and he actually became the dean of the law school 2 months later. So we're looking at June of
yeah,
2023. His name was not removed from the document, however, until July of this year. That's where the main wrinkle in all this is, because
yeah,
if this was just a normal practice where his name was on it, he became the dean and said, "Oh, I did this
mhm,
thing that was very partisan. You should get me off of it." That should have happened over a year
yeah,
ago. But it seems like it did not happen until Project 2025 started making waves, and
mhm,
probably somebody up above Mr. Moore and in the hierarchy of things was like, yeah, we got to get his name off of this thing.
yeah,
So again, it was a contributor. I don't think there's as much to it in terms of perhaps the content, but I do think it's a slightly iffy look that he did not have his name removed. It seems until
yeah.
it became until Project 2025 became a problem, more or less. So that's fun. But
Very
outside of
interesting.
that, of course, I mean that's yeah, that's the most of it. But then the trib is trying to make it seem like BYU Law School is covert ops for Project 2025. Not it's not
I
quite what's happening here, but
don't
okay.
think I'd quite go that far. Well, our next story that is somewhat politically related is also from the Tribune, and it is a piece that they did on Stephen E. Snow, who is an emeritus general authority. So many of you may
Hmm.
recognize his name because he was a historian for the church from 2012 to 2019, and he
Yeah.
did some really fantastic things while he was there. First of all, he's a lawyer, he's an attorney, so I just naturally like him right off the bat, of course. But we're a club. We stick together, Geoff. Anyway, one of the things that he helped do is he helped shepherd to the completion the gospel topics essays, which of course tackled some of the really thorny issues and doctrinal issues that members of the church that were kind of coming to the surface then via the internet, and
Hmm.
kind of a lot of people were leaving the church over some of these issues. And so I loved it when the church released these gospel topic essays,
Yeah.
because it was it was a great way to say, well, here's another way to look at it. You can look at it that way, but you can also look at it this way. And there was a lot of transparency that came out in those gospel topic essays that we'd never even heard of before. I also found this fascinating in the article. He took over the supervision of the church historical sites, and he placed a premium on education over proselytizing at the
Hmm.
church historical sites, which I thought that is very good. Maybe that will help drive more people to go to the sites if they don't feel like they're going to get attacked by missionaries. Anyway, what is interesting about him is he was or is, I should say, because he's still alive, he is a Democrat. And he talks in this
Oh
article
my
about being a
gosh.
general authority and being a Democrat.
Why are we even covering this? This is
I know.
ridiculous.
But before we get to that, I have to tell you, because he talks in this article about how he got called as a general authority. Because before he became the church historian, he was actually called in 2001 as a general authority. He's living in St. George. He's a practicing lawyer. It's, I don't know, like a Wednesday, Thursday, typical weekday. He's getting ready to go to work. His telephone rings. He answers his telephone. And on the other end of his telephone is let's see. It was Don Stolley, who was the secretary to President Gordon B. Hinckley. And he says, Brother Snow? And he says, yes. And he's like, hold for President Hinckley, please. President Hinckley gets on the phone and President Hinckley says, how are you? And he says, well, I'm doing fine. And President Hinckley said, are you making a lot of money practicing law in St. George? And he said, well, I've been very fortunate, President. And President Hinckley said, well, that's about to change. I'm calling you to be a 70. And that's how he got his call to be
Wow.
a general authority. Then he had to tell his wife. And he said, my wife literally, her knees buckled and she fell on the ground. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Anyway, he talks about being a Democrat. And he said, I didn't really talk too much, or I didn't really,
Hmm.
they don't spend a lot of time talking about their political beliefs amongst each other. They are busy running an international church and dealing with these issues and not so much political issues, but they all kind of know where each other lies in terms of politics. So he said, it wasn't just me not talking about it, it was also them. But I found this to be really interesting. He said that the I presume he doesn't say, he says they. I assume they would constitute either the first presidency or the Quorum of the 12. He doesn't
Hmm.
specify. He says they liked being able to go to Nevada Senator Harry Reid, the Democratic Majority Leader in the Senate at the time, because he could open many doors and help many missionaries that were in trouble as the president. They used Harry Reid a lot. He came with his wife and spoke to the Quorum of the 12. I was there when he did. He was a very devout member.
Yeah,
So,
Harry Reid did a lot
a
of
lot
quiet
for the
work helping the
church.
church that people were not
Exactly.
aware of. Yeah,
Exactly.
very
And
much
there are
so.
a lot of people in the church who think very poorly of Harry Reid because he
It's
was a
true.
Democrat. I think there's no way he could be a member in good standing. He was a flaming liberal Democrat. So I think that was kind of really interesting to hear Elder Snow's perspective on it, to say, no, I am here to testify he was relied upon by the members of the 12 and they really liked him and he was a very faithful member. So
I like that he
anyway,
does say he was ribbed. They ask him also. It's actually
yeah,
it's a pretty candid interview,
it is.
honestly.
It's a
Like,
very candid interview.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
He
he even
does.
said he
Go
says
ahead.
I didn't always see eye to eye with the
Yeah.
brethren on environmental and political issues, but that's fine. And then he said, was anybody else a Democrat? We know Marlon Jensen was a faithful Democrat. Like, I knew that,
Yeah.
and I was ribbed about it. The anecdote about M. Russell Ballard cracks me up. Did you read that one? It
Oh
says,
yeah. He said M. Russell Ballard talked about, oh, we could really baptize you as a Republican.
yeah. Says he says this one is funny. The brethren don't get all bogged down in Utah politics because they're worried about an international church. While that is true, I think the church very much gets bogged down in Utah politics. So
Well,
unless they're just like giving it to the Utah area presidency, which maybe that's the deal, and they let the 70 kind of
I think that is what they do. Is
yeah.
I think the lower level general authorities. I don't think the Quorum of the 12 and the first presidency really get bogged down, but I think they assign that task to a lot of the lower ranking general
I mean,
authorities.
Tiffany, what would happen to the church if when you went to a restaurant, you could see someone mixing an alcoholic drink? You like testimonies would fail at a global scale. It would be a new pandemic all over again. So this is actually I love how candid this interview is. But I mean, maybe because he's no longer in the 70 at all. I mean, he even says they talk about the what was the policy, about the children of homosexual parents could
Yeah.
not be baptized, and he straight up says, "I was surprised by the policy in the first place, and I was delighted it was reversed. I thought it was unnecessary. I'm glad President Nelson thought to get rid of it." Yeah.
All right. Well, Geoff,
Very
we are
fascinating.
we are almost hitting an hour. I know we have a whole bunch of stories we didn't get to, so I think we're going to have to save those for the Patreon segment because
What?
I
What is
got
this? You guys actually like stop at an hour? This is Twim. You go for 3 hours if you have to. Friggin' John DeLynn, look out.
Geoff, you were the one who specifically told me and Ariane, don't go over an hour. It affects something or other. I don't
Yeah,
know
but that
what
was
it
before I
affects.
was like back. All right, fine. I'll do whatever you want.
Anyway, I got
That's
two
fine.
more segments that we have to do before we close out the show. The first segment being I have to do Mormons behaving badly because I have an update on my lifetime
You
achievement
better
winner.
hurry then. You've got 2.5 minutes.
Kurt will give me a little grace if I'm just a few minutes over. My
Make it
lifetime
rain.
achievement winner, which is Ammon Bundy. Ammon Bundy, of course, packed up from Idaho, and he moved to Utah. He filed bankruptcy in Utah because he's trying to get rid of his $52 million judgment that St. Luke's got against him. So when St. Luke's was going after him here in Idaho, they tried to get all his financials, and he just blew them off, like a $3 bill. And so now the bankruptcy judge is like, you have to go sit for some depositions, and you have to turn over your financial records if you want any hope of me discharging your debt.
Jeez.
So we will see what he does, if he will actually sit for the depositions. They attempted to question him during his meeting with creditors, and he invoked his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination 40 times during that meeting. So I don't know
Okay.
how successful they're going to be in being able to depose him. But the flip side of that
Jeez.
is, if he doesn't want to play, he's not going to get his debt just discharged in bankruptcy. So St. Luke's can continue to then make his life miserable, at least according to him. So
This is
that's
what you
our.
need. Now that Chad Daybell is all done in Lori Vallow, you've got to have something else to latch on to. So I'm glad you have things to live for.
Oh,
It's,
I have been covering Ammon Bundy way before Chad
I
and
I
Lori, and
know. I
way
know.
after
I
Chad and
know.
Lori.
I know.
That is the reason why he is my Lifetime Achievement Award winner in the category of Mormons behaving badly. All right, so
What a
now
beauty.
to wrap out the show, we always do our favorite things. So I share my favorite. I have my guests share their favorite thing. Then I share my favorite thing.
Mm-hmm.
These are strictly things we like. It can be anything whatsoever. It can be an item, a podcast, a TV show, a song. Doesn't matter. There is no paid endorsement for any of these things. We just like to share with others what our favorite things are.
I
So
love
Geoff,
Postum though. Big fan. Just love
I
it.
I
Love it so
know.
much. I bathe in it. I exfoliate with it. Just love it.
So
It's the
Geoff,
best.
did you bring a favorite thing to share with our listeners tonight?
Uh,
I didn't
I
give
mean,
you
a
a lot of warning
favorite
about
thing.
this.
A
But
favorite
doesn't
thing.
what about, like, what's your favorite podcast that you're listening to right now? Aside
I
from
don't
the
have
one that you're
time.
doing,
I don't
or
even
a
have time.
TV show that you're watching, something you're streaming that you've
I
loved.
will say the one thing I'm very thankful for is the Great British Baking Show came back last
Ah,
week. So if you
okay.
want to talk favorite things, that last week of September, when Netflix starts dropping episodes and I get 10 weeks of British people baking interesting things and with cheeky humor, it's delightful. And it just takes you right up to Thanksgiving. So when that first episode hits, I know I am entering the best stretch of the year. I get to have this carry me through October. Then we get into the holidays, and then it's all coming up aces after that. So
Ah,
it's an important milestone
okay.
for me. So I am very. This is not. I know you and Ariane have often had like random widgets and things you like
Exactly.
that you bought. Um, I don't think I have that. I'm curious about that Ninja slow cooker that apparently you can sear in, but I've got to learn more about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I haven't heard about that at all.
Yeah.
So,
Oh well.
well, I will tell you what my favorite thing is this time. It is a movie that I went and saw a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if it's still in the theaters because nothing ever stays in the
Yeah.
theaters for
Deadpool
very
and
long.
Wolverine is still playing. Yeah, you can go see it. It's fine.
Yeah, no, it wasn't either one of
Yeah.
those. It was the Reagan movie that has Dennis Quaid in it.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I really liked it. And I'm sure part of it was there was, I was when he was elected in 1980, I was 13 years old. So he was the or no, I was 12 years old. He was the president all during my, teenage, really formative years. I lived through the Reagan administration. And so I really
I
I
survived
really
the Reagan
I
administration.
survived the Reagan administration. I really enjoyed the movie. I thought that they did a good job with it. The good, the bad, the ugly. There was a lot of stuff in it, and I mean, ultimately, it kind of was a feel good movie. But I have to tell you,
Yeah.
in today's political environment, I walked out of that movie and I'm like, wait, can we have him for president? So, as anyway,
Why
that's what I
not? That's
thought.
cool. Yeah, that one kind of came and went for me. I heard the Wild Robot's really good. My kids went and saw that, and
Oh,
my 6 year old was like misty eyed at the end. Like my wife texted me, she
oh,
took him, and she's like, it's not like a bad thing. I think he's like feeling something from this movie, and I think it's really cool if your kid can actually connect with something at that kind of an emotional level, like
oh.
be moved as you should be. I I had to work, so I'll see it someday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
It's
and
hard
isn't
being a
that
provider and following the family proclamation, Tiffany. You know all about that. It's
oh,
very difficult.
yes. And
Very
isn't the
difficult.
6-year-old your middle of your 3 boys?
The middle of the 3 boys, but I guess since I was last on the show, I had another kid too since
Yes, you
yeah,
you
yeah.
you did. But if I recall correctly, he was always the one that had all sorts of big feels too.
He is the one that has big feels, yes. Lots of
So,
feelings. Lots of
lots
feelings
of
from that little
feels.
from that little
Lots of
dude.
feels
He's
from
he's
that
he's a
child.
he's a sweet little boy. He's got a lot of feelings. A lot of
Exactly.
feelings.
All right. Well, Geoff, are you going to hang out and do Patreon with me, and we'll hit maybe a few
Absolutely.
of these stories that we didn't get to?
As the person who started Twim's Patreon account and never offered any exclusive content for it in my entire run, I am excited to do the right thing and be a part of that.
Okay. Okay,
It'll be good.
good. Well, we will record that. So let's just wrap it up here. First of all, I want to thank you very much for coming on with me tonight. This has absolutely been a blast. I have had the best time. It has been so nice to hear your voice again and hear your analysis. And hopefully, we won't wait 2 more years to have you back on again. Not that we'll make you a regular because I know that's probably not in your cards right now between your being a provider and in a bishopric, but maybe in another year or so we can get you back on again.
Oh, I'm always happy to stop by. You know that, Tiffany. It's great to see you. It's great to
It
hang
is.
out, man. I think about all the things we built. How I always forgot how you didn't. I think you and Ariane got into it because I just put out like a casting call
You did.
all those
You
years ago.
put
Yeah,
out a
yeah.
casting
So
call,
and look how
and we
far you've come now. I was joking with you when we started. You've got like a boom stand and a legitimate microphone. You're not just
eh,
huddled in front of that goofy one you used. You're doing beautiful things. This is great. Just glad to
we
be a part
are
of it. I feel like you're my
exactly.
child, and I'm here watching you blossom, and it's wonderful.
Oh, you're making me feel good.
This is just delightful. No, this is great.
It
It's
is.
great to come back. I have fun. Thanks for having me.
All right, you're welcome. Listeners, as always, you can find us on Facebook. The Twin Sisters Instagram account, I will put up there Geoff and I's favorite things. And then if you have any comments, you can reach out to contact@thisweekendmormons.com and we
That still
will
work? Oh, that's
it
good.
does still work. And Kurt actually, when people email stuff in, and they do, Kurt forwards it to the appropriate host. So
All
the
right,
appropriate
folks.
host
Send your
gets to
hatred
respond.
my way. I'm ready for it.
Exactly.
I'm
You're up for
pumped.
it? Okay.
I'm
All
ready
right,
for it.
Geoff. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thanks, Twim Nation.
Bye, Twim Nation.